what I did enjoy with CloudReach and being a smaller organization is that if you want, and if you have the right attitude, and if you have the right aptitude, you have the ability to affect change and to contribute to the strategy and to contribute to, should we start to be creative? Should we do this differently? Should we do this deal slightly differently? Can we explore this angle? Can we actually look at this differently from a project profitability perspective, et cetera, et cetera? So for me, going into leadership was about impact.
Welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. Microsoft Mentors is designed to lift the lid on the journeys of the most successful leaders in the Microsoft partner ecosystem. Every week, through candid conversations with founders, business owners, and technology thought leaders, we explore their strategies, grit and lessons behind their growth, and how they're building competitive advantage for the future. These are the untold stories and practical lessons from leaders who are defining success in Azure, AI, data, app innovation, and security. Our mission is simple: to tell partner stories at scale and create impactful Microsoft conversations. Today, I'm really excited for this conversation. I'm joined with Andre, who is CEO at Telana. It's a new business, a new venture, and we can dive into a little bit more about what that all looks like throughout this episode. But I guess to start off with, Andre, for anyone that's unfamiliar, maybe give us a quick 60-second rundown on who you are, what you've been up to, and what you're doing now, if that's okay, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we can go into more detail later, but my name is Andre, as you said. I'm the CEO of Telana. We're experts in applied innovation. What we mean by applied is, outcome-based, business-led innovation, not just for the sake of it. And we can get into that later on. But been passionate about the tech and the possibilities that tech opens for the world and for businesses to become better. I love learning and learning fast. And I guess my career has been all about making things happen, and hopefully that's what we're doing here as well. So that's me. I've been in the tech industry for the last 20 years, with a journey that is, I guess, unorthodox in some ways, but also quite straightforward in others. So that is
I was going to say that you've been down different pathways and different avenues throughout your career. I guess was tech something that you were always interested in? Did you always see yourself landed in the technology space?
I'd like to say yes, but actually not really. When I was at school, and I grew up in Portugal, so that's kind of where I went to school and university. And you get to that GCSEs and then A levels, and I always tried to choose a path that allowed me to explore as many opportunities as I could and leave as many options open as I could. And I think I did that probably throughout my career. And you had like the very hardcore science and maths and that kind of path. You had the kind of more straightforward humanities, languages, that kind of history, etc., that kind of path. And I decided to go with economics, throughout school, which is something that is a bit of, history and a bit of science and a bit of maths and a bit of probabilities and a bit of, gives you that kind of, I guess, more options.
Quite a lot of luck with economics, isn't it?
And a lot of uncertainty as well, because economics is not an exact science, so it's an interesting thing. And then I went to university. I did economics, a degree in economics, and from there, it was only when I worked in kind of early roles in finance and kind of admin roles. I worked for a very small media startup. This guy hired me straight out of university to be his number two. I don't think he had any idea of what a university graduate actually knows about real life. It was a steep learning curve for me as well, but it was interesting. But then I decided to do a master's degree, which I did in Spain, and that MBA school had an agreement with Dell in Madrid to place one graduate a year to go and do, work in this case was in sales and marketing. And that's how my journey in tech started. So I went to Madrid to work for Dell. In kind of what I was doing at the time was updating their website for Spain and Portugal. Literally, I would get an email with all the new servers and their specs, and believe it or not, I would then manually upload them into the system, one by one, like typing every single spec, so that they would fit correctly on there. But that's kind of how I started working in tech. I then by mistake, or I applied for a job at Oracle because I thought it was in the same industry. Why not? That I thought was in Madrid actually, and then they called me from Dublin and said, no, this is a role, it's a sales development role, in Dublin for the Spanish market, because I can speak Spanish as well, and almost kind of by accident, I went through the interview process, got the job, and I found myself living in Dublin without knowing anyone or anything about it. But the interesting thing about Oracle is not a very loved company in the world of tech, but I loved my time there because their technical training was really good. It was the first time I started understanding more about tech and the possibilities it could drive, primarily around data and around also security and governance around that data. And that's when I started understanding, this is actually a big opportunity, and that this is something the market is looking for, and we're talking about 20 years ago. So a lot of these things were still in their infancy. So yeah, it was really good, and that's how I would say I get a bit of more of a passion for tech.
Yeah, and I guess going to somewhere like Oracle, thrown quite quickly, I guess, into the enterprise technology space as well. Then was it? So going in and working with big organizations on big transformations.
Yeah, exactly. And look, at the time, I was literally banging the phones, trying to get leads and upsell into kind of existing customers. So like your traditional, sales development role, which again, I always have a big, we employ business development reps here at Telana, and did the same at Cloudbeach. And actually, I have a huge respect for those roles because you have to have a lot of resilience, and you have to have a lot of kind of you have to be a self-starter, you have to self-motivate, and it's hard. But again, it gives you a lot of that kind of work ethic and mentality that you probably need throughout your career. So it was really, really good to do that. But actually, when it comes to kind of enterprise selling, I moved to SAP. And I spent quite a bit of time at SAP, about 5-6 years. And what I really liked about SAP, as much as kind of obviously now it's kind of a legacy technology, although it's still thriving, but I know it's what people in the world I live in look at SAP like this kind of old dinosaur. But what I really enjoyed was I went from having conversations with DBAs and kind of technology leaders to have conversations with CFOs and CEOs, because I was basically doing new business. And you don't sell SAP to a technical buyer. You sell SAP to a CEO, to a CFO. Now, this is how you're going to transform your business. This is how you're going to govern it. This is how you're going to internationalize, and by adopting best practices from day one. Because if you start your business in France, then SAP already complies with all the right legislation and best practices in France. And if you start your business somewhere else, this is how you're going to do it. Best practices around logistics, or whatever the industry was. And that was actually for me was a bit of a pivotal moment, in the sense that started selling technology to business buyers, and therefore gave me that kind of, I guess, an extra string to my bow around linking the technology to the business benefit. And that was kind of something that I trained over the years, and it came in handy for everything I did afterwards. So for me, it was a good was a good score. So that kind of shaped a little bit of what I've, how I thought about selling in subsequent years.
Yeah, it's a totally different conversation, like you say, when you're talking to a technology leader within a business that's overseeing a technical function. They've got different drivers that they want to pull through a technology solution. Ultimately, when you then take that up to the senior leadership levels, the C-suite, you're then going to talk to them about what business drivers the technology can open up, and it changes the lens on that, and ultimately, I guess, changes the level and type of conversation that you're having. And then as you sort of move through your career, it looks like you kind of went from more of those individual contributor roles and started then taking that step into management, head of type roles. So was that an intentional path that you'd always seen yourself going down, of sort of taking that step away from being an individual contributor and taking over the more sort of strategic and leadership type roles?
Yeah, so that's always an interesting question, because so obviously, one of the talked about joining kind of SAP, but obviously when I joined CloudReach in the very early days, we were, I don't know, 30, 40 people at the time. And, we could talk about kind of how that we grew that business to almost 1,000 people worldwide, almost all organically. It was a really incredible journey. But the interesting thing, what I did, and this will tie back to your question. So just let me just go around a little bit.
Yeah.
No, because what I did enjoy with CloudReach and being a smaller organization is that if you want, and if you have the right attitude, and if you have the right aptitude, you have the ability to affect change and to contribute to the strategy and to contribute to, should we start to be creative? Should we do this differently? Should we do this deal slightly differently? Can we explore this angle? Can we actually look at this differently from a project profitability perspective, et cetera, et cetera? So for me, going into leadership was about impact and about bringing that. So it's not something, I didn't dream of being a CEO of a tech business when I was a child, far from it. But it was when I went into CloudReach, it did open my eyes to what you could do in leadership roles and really how you could affect change. Whereas, in big organizations I worked with before, you have lots of processes and lots of things are very good. Don't get me wrong, but it's all set for you, and sometimes you can't really have no ability to be creative or to do something different, or to help with decision making. So for me, that was the driver, and obviously, to do that, you move into leadership roles, and we were also growing very fast. So it's almost kind of is a mixture of both, right? I want to contribute more. I want to, be part of the decision-making process because I think I can bring something to that. And we're growing fast, and we need people to manage teams, and therefore you thrust into it and trusted by at the time by the founders to get on with that. So it's a mixture of ambition. Of course, people that say they don't have ambition, I think is kind of, it gets to these roles, I think is slightly, not sure if it's entirely true, but it's a mixture of ambition and circumstance, and then kind of that willingness to contribute.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you look at the timeline of yourself at CloudReach, and like you say, you 30-ish people when you started there, and that was sort of early 2010s, so 2012, right at probably the uptick in adoption of public cloud services. So I guess in those earlier days where public cloud was just coming to market and you were a smaller business, but I imagine probably, competing with the larger enterprise organizations in the space. What did that dynamic look like of dealing with new technology, having to educate customers on that, and also having to compete on the same sort of level against, probably the big SIs of the world?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because actually there's a couple of things there. So one was the education was a big thing in the early days. I mean, sometimes this is 2012, right? GCP didn't exist, Azure didn't exist, and when I joined CloudReach, AWS was only EC2 and S3, which is literally just storage and computing. There was nothing else. And after that, it's start, you start having kind of the VPCs, the virtual private clouds, and then the kind of the auto scaling and all that stuff that then comes kind of after. But actually, it's very, very early days if you think about it. When I went for my interview, I had to learn about this AWS thing. I had no idea what it was. Kind of reading some reports, and so of course, when we went and talked to customers, we used to go and educate people. I remember we had a whiteboarding pitch that was kind of honed in over the months and the years, that we go, this is what cloud computing is, this is how the shared resources work, this is where your things are, this is how you really kind of educated people on this. And also, there was the main thing at the time was also data protection, not so much from a GDPR perspective, that didn't exist either back then, but more of a, where is my data? Where is the
when it's not in our four walls of our infrastructure anymore, it's going to go off somewhere else. How can we make sure it's secure?
And even worse, at the time, there was no regions in the UK, for example, so you can actually put your data in the UK. So are the US looking at my data? And then we're armed with a Patriot Act, which is what happened. At the time, it was the agreement between the European Union, I believe, and the US around kind of data sharing, and what they were, I guess, saying they were going to do with the data or not. So there's a lot of education. There's a lot of education around automation, a lot of education around why this was better. And there was a lot of cost conversations, because obviously the cloud in the early days was, and still is, but at the time was very, the cost element was quite significant in terms of the difference in terms of running things on premise and running things in the cloud. But also one thing that a lot of people, the cloud providers like AWS and kind of subsequently the others as well, they always, part of their pitch, they would say, yeah, because you can move, CapEx investment to OpEx investment. You can move from that kind of CapEx model to have. But it was funny because they always thought that was a big advantage. But a lot of customers didn't want that. They said, no, I want this to continue to be a capital investment, because I can, make this, I can disperse the money now, amortize it over the years. I want that actually something that they liked. So it's actually quite interesting, because there was this conflicting messages where the cloud providers say, oh, this is really good, but the customers are, well, some customers
want something different.
Exactly that, because they, but then in terms of competition, we were competing primarily with the bigger vendors, so the Accentures and the big, the big GSIs, the kind of the Cognizants and kind of the TCS and all the kind of the thing, the usual suspects, but we were, especially back then, we were the very, very, very specialists in this world. We are the ones that could deliver this. We're the ones that were nimble enough to, deploy small teams, as we used to call it, small teams and big outcomes for customers. And that was always our selling point. And actually, a lot of customers went down the route, especially because we were selling to the large enterprises. A lot of customers went down the route of going with some of those vendors and then coming back because it didn't work. And this is not as true now this is still true always for the kind of advanced stuff, but for the kind of what's now table stakes around cloud infrastructure, that's not true anymore. I think that's more commoditized. But at the time, that was kind of the big selling point for us is, we can do this quickly. But again, as a small company, then, large organizations also need, they buy not only for capability, but also buy for trust. So, that's when then sometimes those bigger players bring that kind of level of comfort. And rightly so, right? Because, if something goes wrong and there's, massive liabilities or anything like that, you can, they know they can rely on the relationship with these bigger organizations to kind of sort that out, where with a small organization carries more risk. We always get that. But ultimately, we were the ones really delivering the big outcomes and the big projects for customers. And, as a result of that, we acquired lots of references and kind of were really, really successful in those years.
Yeah. And what did, so with that journey at Cloudreach, was that, you mentioned it was sort of organic growth. So what did that growth curve look like from 30 to 1,000? What sort of time period did that growth happen within?
Yeah, so we got to about, I'd say that was from 2012 to 2019 or so. And yeah, we, it was that kind of growing, almost kind of doubling every year. When we did our first private equity investment in 2017, we were about 350 people around that time, if I'm not mistaken, and then kind of again doubled in size. And then we did acquire a business in the US in 2018, about 120 people. That's the biggest inorganic move we've made. That team was about the same size as our US team at the time, so we kind of doubled our US team overnight with the acquisition of Relics Cloud. And yeah, so it's kind of, if you think about it, it's in a very short period of time, and again, almost all that organically, but also, with a lot of international expansion. So we started early on in France and Germany. Things didn't, and the Netherlands, but things didn't really pick up. We started early on, kind of 2013, 14, but actually things really picked up after that in those regions. And obviously the US was where the big growth opportunity was, while continued to grow quite considerably in the UK. The home market was always a big chunk of the business, and kind of, well, I would say probably the most reliable in terms of growth as well.
Yeah. And then towards the end of your time there was a big uptick in the Microsoft side of the Cloudreach business, and that eventually led to you winning one of the UK Partner of the Year award. So was there a particular shift in dynamic that actually made that Microsoft part of the business accelerate at that particular time and take off?
Yeah, no, I think so we diversified kind of towards that post Blackstone acquisition. We had done a few things before, but kind of more seriously post that event. And yeah, we created a dedicated Microsoft practice. We actually had a kind of a special dedicated plan with our Microsoft counterparts that we kind of set out to achieve. And there was lots of things in terms of capabilities, because we were making a big investment in having a dedicated practice, because we hired dedicated partner people, dedicated operations people, dedicated salespeople, dedicated BDRs, dedicated delivery resources. So we were delivering on that jointly with Microsoft, and a really tight plan to develop, joint go-to-market, marketing plans, and joint kind of co-selling activities. And I guess the biggest success, apart from yours truly leading that team, I jest. No, but the biggest successes we've had were around really, if you put the effort in, and obviously we had to have the resources as well, but it was that the dedication of working very closely with Microsoft, but also having the creating that dedicated capability that was meaningful. It was not just about having dedicated resources to tick a box. We aligned our processes in terms of training, in terms of certifications. We aligned everything to the Microsoft world. We aligned, even revenue recognition, how we measured our sellers, how we measured the way because obviously, ultimately Microsoft wants to grow their business, right? This is about growing together. So, how do we grow and Microsoft grows? And it's about measuring that. So when we actually engage with the customer, how do we take that from one place to the other? And, and ultimately it was getting those success stories. So we managed to get, early references, build on those, acquire new customers, deliver more value to Microsoft and to those customers. And, the year we won the Microsoft Partner of the Year, which when I was running that team, we grew that business 500%, in terms of ACR generated for Microsoft. And actually not too far out from a revenue, from a company revenue perspective as well. So, we really, really accelerated our growth, which was building on all those things that I talked about. Also have a very simplified message. That doesn't mean simple, it means simplified, which is, here's what we're good at. So when these are the three things we're really, really good at, is this, and that. Yes, we do everything else. And that's fine when we talk to customers, when in front of a customer, we can explain everything we do. But the way we lead, the message we lead with when we go to market, these are the three things we're very good at, right? And we got the right certifications. We achieved the Microsoft Azure Expert MSP. We're the first company in the world to get the Kubernetes specialization. So we were the first ones to do that. It was a very thorough process. It's similar to the Expert MSP, which is kind of audited and, with real customer use cases. And so, we put a lot of effort into getting the basics right, getting the messaging right, and then getting those accreditations and kind of the seal of approval, as it were, from Microsoft on those elements.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, just like I say, really interesting growth. I think interesting there what you said. The difference between a simple message and just having that real clear differentiator. Because I've had it a few times when I've had conversations on the podcast. I think one of the big things with all of these technologies in the public cloud space, digital transformation, as we move further into the AI world, is ultimately everyone has access, every service provider, every partner has access to the same tools. So it's then how do you differentiate yourself in the market against all of that competition and all of that noise? Being an expert in Azure or AWS is great, but realistically, it's such a big there's such big platforms now, that you have to have your lanes within that in terms of where you can go to market and have that cut through message. And that doesn't mean you don't do the other stuff. And like I say, when you get into those customer conversations, you can build into that. But it's all about having that real clear go to market of this is how we're positioned, this is what we're great at, and this is why you should be coming and talking to us, basically, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a differentiation piece, as you mentioned. You have to be clear on why should people be talking to you, right? Ultimately, that's what's going to drive conversations. That's what's going to drive revenue. That's what's going to drive everything. And hopefully, that's kind of what we're doing here as well, is trying to be very clear on what we are good at. So for as long as we continue to do that, hopefully we'll continue to cut through the market and the all the other noise that our customers get bombarded with every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that sort of leads you down a pathway to where you're at now. And obviously the business now in its current form is Telana, but you joined the business at the time was Ancoris. So I guess talk us a little bit through your decision to join Ancoris. When you joined them, what was their sort of position? How big were they? What excited you about that particular opportunity to go and lead in there? I thought we'd take a very quick break from this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors podcast to just talk a little bit about why the podcast and the community that it serves is so important to us as part of our purpose here at Cloud Decisions and the purpose it drives within the wider Microsoft ecosystem. We've been involved here at Cloud Decisions in the Microsoft ecosystem for over a decade now, working with Microsoft partners and businesses with strong alignment to Microsoft technologies and their technology teams to help them to grow and scale their teams in cloud, security, data, and AI. For the past year, we've been working really hard behind the scenes to develop 2 core talent solutions that are built with our customers in mind and enable Microsoft-aligned businesses to access the talent they need to grow and scale their teams and ultimately hit their business objectives. We've developed CDX, our own proprietary talent intelligence system that uses custom AI, large language models and natural language processing to enable you as an organization, as a technology leader, to make insight-led technology decisions on all of your permanent hires and gives us the data that we really need to take your role to market to execute the search. We've also been working with customers here in the UK and in the US through Global Source, our global talent solution that is built to enable organizations to build borderless technology teams for permanent contract and flexible outsourced resources. So if you're a Microsoft partner or you are a technology leader within a business with a strong Microsoft technology alignment, and you'd like to know a little bit more about how CDX could fuel your permanent hires or how Global Source could offer you a global talent strategy, then feel free to reach out. And now let's get back to this week's episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast.
Yeah. So I joined Ancoris at the time about 4 years ago, and the reason why I joined was so the circumstances were the founder was looking to he had been building the business for 20 years. Wanted to retire and kind of do other pursue the passions outside of cloud computing, and was looking for a successor in the business. And obviously, as part of that, some external investment to kind of fuel the growth, the next stage of growth. And so that was something that was attractive because. Again, not that I would that I dreamt to be a CEO of a tech business, as I mentioned before, all my life. But equally, I had gone to, I had spent a lot of time at CloudReach. Interestingly, running lots of different elements. I ran global sales and marketing. I ran operations and finance for almost a year post acquisition. I run a lot of the M&A and kind of corporate development activities. Obviously, ran the Microsoft practice. So I did lots of things which kind of span anything from strategy to sales to finance to delivery to M&A. So I had accumulated a lot of these experiences that I think would be, in my view, and hopefully the founder here also agreed, would make me a good candidate for the as the next step in a CEO role, because had exposure to all these elements that can kind of relate to, I guess, every single team in there. But that's kind of role wise, and then opportunity wise. The good thing about Ancoris is that as much as Ancoris came from the Google Workspace world, which is where most Google partners had come from, we had already built an application development team and a data and AI team. And those were the things, for me, the opportunity was, well, that's what Google are really good at. That's where kind of, if you think about differentiators again, right? Is that the differentiator is no infrastructure that's becoming kind of more commoditized. And obviously Microsoft and AWS have a much bigger footprint in that space. What Google are good at is kind of cloud native development, data and AI, or that's one of their differentiators. Therefore, I see the opportunity for us to not go through that, going from workspace to that infrastructure and going to kind of more innovative stuff. You also know we can leapfrog that stage and go straight into, being your innovation partner. And we talked about being the most innovative partner in the Google Cloud ecosystem. That's kind of what we set out to do, but we actually measured it. We used to survey. We still do survey all of our Google contacts and asked them to rate us from 1 to 10 every 3 months on how innovative they think we are. And I think the interesting thing about that is that, of course, you can't measure how innovative you are, but equally, you are as innovative as people perceive you to be innovative. So we did that. But the reason, again, why I joined was the company was at that stage that needed kind of the next level. You can grow with a certain structure to a certain size, and then kind of the next level needed a different structure to be built. The company had already really solid foundations actually in terms of systems and processes. We needed to add more, but that was a good foundation to build on, more than what I've seen at other companies at the same stage, especially when I was doing my M&A work at CloudReach. I saw a lot of small companies and some bigger than Ancoris was at the time, with much shoddier setups. So actually the setup was good, but we needed to just kind of build the next layer, right? And then we needed to build the management. The previous management team were also kind of that retirement age, wanted to kind of take the next step. So there was the opportunity to hire new sales leadership, new finance leadership, delivery, implementing delivery processes, enhancing the way we went to market, refining our proposition around the things I've mentioned, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, that was what was really interesting, because it's a great base. There's some great people here already. We could go and find even more talent and kind of supercharge this. And that's kind of that was the opportunity there. And I thought that was quite an exciting time to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And few interesting things in there. So one of the things you said at the start there was that transition from what you were doing and that next step for you into CEO, and what I guess made you feel like you were well positioned to do that was that you had worked in lots of different camps. You worked in finance, sales, delivery, practice lead type roles, and I remember Ben Francis, who's the guy that set up Gymshark, the gymwear brand, he obviously set that up from his bedroom, grew it to a certain size, and he naturally, because he was the founder, became the CEO. And he very quickly realized that he wasn't placed to do that, because he actually, although he'd come up with the brand and come up with the business idea, he didn't know marketing, he didn't know finance, he didn't know all of these different parts. So what he did as the founder at that point, he took himself out of the CEO role, put someone in place for a few years, and he went round and he worked in all the individual teams to understand all the individual drivers within the business. And I think that's, just organically from your career, because you've been in all those different areas and the challenges and the pain points and the potential barriers, like you say, probably put you in a good position to be able to come in and bring all of those ideas together into the CEO role. I was going to say, you also mentioned, so obviously with the founder of Ancoris and a lot of the leadership team at a time looking to make that transition out of the business, how did you manage that, as coming in and leading that change? Were there challenges there? Were there pain points you had to get across?
So interestingly, another thing I learned at CloudReach was that CEO transitions can be quite difficult and fraught with perils. So I was very, very conscious of coming in and making sure that you bring people along with you, right? We didn't have kind of performance issues as such, in terms of the people, the other two key leaders in the business were at kind of that point where they wanted to make a move. So that makes it easier for you than if you have to do yourself. But equally, even then, I think you have to make sure that, one, you respect those people. They've been here for a long time. They did a really good job, and I'm still in touch with them for what it's worth. But you need to respect their contribution and respect that a lot of people respect them as well. So you have to do, even if it's their will, you need to do things carefully. But you also need to make sure that, when I came in, I could see, I'd like to change that. I'd like to change that. There's a few things, of course, everyone does that. There's just not, but you have to also make sure that you focus on the right things. And I used to tell people, sometimes, look, there's a few things kind of there that I know we need to change at some point, but there's like 2 or 3 things that we need to do now and then change those things later. We need to bring people along with us. For me, I was very keen on, understanding understanding the culture that I obviously got a good view of before joining, but really embedding myself in the culture, making sure that I could adapt to the business as much as I could, rather than trying to come in. You always have lots of ideas and things you want to change, but actually after a while you realize, well, that's not actually something we should change, or that's not important, or that's not. So that, you still need to make bold decisions. You still need to, to be decisive. And I always say to people, I have no problem in being decisive and making quick decisions, and difficult decisions. But you have to make sure that those are really going to have a positive impact in the long term, even if there's short-term pain. So yeah, being very careful about that was something I was always passionate about. I think on that front, there's probably other things we could have done better, and you always learn, and you could do better. But I think on that front, because when I say we, because it's not just me, right? Because then we hired a few more people in the management team. I think we did a really good job of, and lots of people. In fact, lots of people that were here before are still here. So I would say there's still probably a big chunk of people that were here pre-2021 are still here, and have developed their careers, have grown into bigger roles and all sorts of different things. It's funny because after, I think it was maybe a couple of years, when we were looking our our company survey, we use a tool called Culture Amp that we use to kind of measure kind of the engagement.
Yeah.
After a couple of years after I joined, and kind of some of the rest of the team joined, the people that have been here before the changes were happier on average in terms of the because you can break it down in tenure, were happier than the people that joined recently, which actually I was really proud of, because that's something that that was really, really important to me coming in, having seen how things can go wrong. I promised to myself, this is something we need to get right, is that transition, making sure that we bring people along on this journey. So yeah, you have to be careful. You have to focus on the right things, and you need listen to people as well. You need to really, really listen to understand why things are done in a certain way that you may think that should be done differently, or don't kind of jump into quick judgments before you make those decisions.
Yeah. And I guess it's either you really like the state of change, Andre, or it follows you around. And so as you've sort of moved through, and like you say, Ancoris, now Telana, and that has been through the merger of Ancoris and Sundown Solutions. Sundown Solutions coming from the Microsoft side as an Azure expert MSP, and obviously Ancoris, like we've spoken about, on the GCP side of things. So I guess from your perspective, what made that combination make sort of real strategic sense for you as a business moving into the future?
Yeah, so you can always, for me, there's no right or wrong in terms of the, whichever strategy organizations pick in terms of partner and partner dedication, and kind of, if they choose to go single-threaded, one partner or multiple partners. From a technology perspective, what we've seen at the stage we're at, with the types of customers we engage with, and the types of engagements we have with these customers, over the last couple of years, we saw a big shift. Even going back to the very beginning of this conversation, when we talk about selling to technical buyers versus business buyers, everyone has become a lot more of a business buyer, including in technical roles. We've seen a shift from, people would come to us, whether here or CloudReach as well. We have an AWS migration project. We have a GCP transformation program. We have an Azure engagement for you. We now have people come to us or we go to them, and then they come to us with, we have a problem. I have a problem. Can you solve it? And as a result of that, the being single threaded was sometimes one, hurting a little bit our ability to be a trusted advisor to customers, because actually customers buy from us because they like our problem solving capabilities. And yes, our technical ability, our problem solving capabilities, but then a lot of the world is already on specific platforms, Microsoft obviously being a leader in that space.
Yeah.
And we saw the opportunity that, with Microsoft capabilities, we can bring the same, because we had customers asking us, can you do this on Microsoft? Can you solve, because we already have our data on Microsoft, because we already, have our systems on Microsoft. So for us, was seeing that change in buying behavior and change in the conversation, that made sense to broaden it, to broaden the kind of the partnerships, the partnership spectrum that we had. Also, and then, so that's kind of first, number one. Then number two, the clear market leaders from a cloud service provider, from a hyperscaler perspective, the clear leaders in the AI space, which is kind of what customers want to talk about and what we do for our customers, are, Microsoft and Google, I'd say by quite a margin in terms of their own technology. AWS, good technology, but kind of relies more on third-party kind of AI vendors, whereas Microsoft and Google got good kind of native story. So that's, Microsoft was the logical next step in terms of the other ecosystem we should tap into. And then when we started looking at this, it became quite clear quite quickly that Sundown was the right choice for us to expand. One, because organically takes time, takes investment, is a lot of you would take a lot of time to get there to that stage. And also that we had Sundown, a Azure Expert MSP, so top tier partner, lots of potential. So lots of, I would say, Sundown was kind of one of these companies that was growing, making, a lot of a splash in the Microsoft ecosystem, and with a lot of potential. So for us, it's kind of, how do we supercharge that potential? And we also had worked with them before on a couple of joint bids, so the teams already knew each other from before. So it became, yes, we looked at the market, but Sundown became apparent as the ideal partner for us to join forces with, and that's what we did. So and we, as a result of those, we created Telana, which now, as I said, we class ourselves as experts in applied innovation, which is around bringing those business outcomes to those buyers who now are business buyers everywhere, whether in technical roles or not.
I think as well, as we go further into that, or go further into this AI era that we're now in, like you mentioned, it's so use case focused, isn't it now? Whereas before, in the early days of public cloud, it might have been, we've got this big data center over here and we want to lift and shift it over into Azure virtual machines. Now it's about we've got X business problem, we think we can find a efficiency, we can increase performance, X, Y, and Z through technology. And then it's then partnering with organizations like yourself to then unpick what the technology options are within that. And like you say, I guess now that you've got the scope within Telana of having the Microsoft capabilities and the GCP capabilities, you position yourself to have those broader strategic conversations with customers, because I guess you're less tied to the pure Google solution as maybe you were before, rather than having to maybe partner out other bits. You now got the capability to go, this is how we can support you on the Microsoft stack, on the GCP side of things, a combination of the two, ultimately to solve the problem for the customer, isn't it?
Exactly that. And also, we our positioning and our, again, back to the being clear about what we do, right, is about that kind of business outcome, but about that applied use cases, right? This is something that has to be tangible, that you can use, and you can see the outcomes as a result. So, people only spend money with us, or with anyone for that matter, to make more money, save money, or to kind of reduce risk. Right? As kind of this is not something I came up with, it's kind of the cliche, right? So, but ultimately, that's what we're here to do, which is to we help customers with getting better insights and better data. We worked with a well-known brand to get some real-time data so they could increase the number of items that is sold there and then during the interaction with the customer. That's them spending money to make more money. We did our company all hands this morning, and one of the technical showcases that our team was showing was we are saving about between 1 and 1.5 million a year per customer just by governing their storage in SharePoint and the hierarchies and all of those things, to have that well governed but still accessible, so the customer still gets the same outcome, but save £1 million a year, which is pretty impressive. And of course, we manage a lot of environments for customers from a security perspective, from an infrastructure management perspective. There's a big hospital here in London. We run their clinical application that runs on GCP, and we built it on GCP and we manage it for them. We keep it live and running every day, and most of their other stuff runs on premise hospital, and that breaks pretty much every week. And the only application that never breaks is one that we run. So again, we're reducing the risk of them having to delay in this case, delay or cancel visits and consultations, which obviously contributes to all sorts of different things that are very important to us in terms of waiting lists and all the rest. So it's about again focusing on that business outcome and focusing on the budgets are tighter than ever. Everyone in our business will tell you that. So the only way to unlock budget is to have a really, really strong business case for everything you do, and that's kind of what we help customers.
Yeah. And I think it'd be interesting to hear your perspective with sort of how far we are into the new era of innovation with AI and those sort of toolings. Are you guys seeing now that organizations at an enterprise scale or a smaller scale are at a point where they're getting real world business benefit in production environments now? Is it still in sort of proof of concept, envisioning type stages? What are you seeing on the ground in terms of what your customers are doing?
Yeah. So what happens here is the technology is always ahead of what people are doing in production. There's a lot of people like using Gemini for smaller things, maybe lower risk, etc. But in terms of like the real use cases and the real kind of real life systems leveraging AI, that is accelerating and is going from POC to production, but it's still not really the edge stuff. So if you think about even in the early cloud days, I was talking about back in 2013, 2014, right? People understood the scaling, how you could use, infrastructure as code and all of those things. And that was kind of the edge stuff back then. But people were still, they understood, okay, I want that, but first I need to move my infrastructure to the cloud, and then I'm going to do all these things. And I think we're at the same stage with AI where people are looking at all this Gen AI stuff is incredible. Here's all the things I can do with it, but they're still here. So they're still on that journey to say, okay, I can start applying some AI while I do it today. I can start building, putting my data in the right shapes and then apply it to my data. So I think the hype is always ahead of what's happening right now, but because the hype has moved on also quite significantly the last couple of years, we're now seeing, these real life AI use cases being implemented in real life and delivering value, but it's still not all the cutting edge examples. Those are still kind of the POC phase, but the things that were not even being talked about, the Gen AI movement has pushed everyone or pulled everyone along that journey. And we're seeing a lot of, a big uptick in people taking AI seriously, because it's not about Gen AI, it's not about AI, it's not about anything. I don't particularly like to go and talk to customers about whether ChatGPT is better than Gemini or Grok or whatever that is. That's not the conversation. The conversation is, can you apply AI to your process, whether that's code development, whether that's applying it to a certain process, applying it to your data and get better insight. That is the conversation. And as an example, we just built something for one of our customers for their field workers, so they do kind of visits. And this is all about using AI to kind of summarize the whole history of the customer. So when the person is going to do the site visit is in the van, they can just click a button, get all the summary, all the history, all the products they need to use when they get to this site visit, what happened last time, who did it last time, etc., etc. So a lot of those things, that's quite simple. Think about it kind of like from a technology perspective. Yeah, there's a bit of work there, don't get me wrong, because you have to. But technologically, it's not incredibly complicated. It actually delivers a lot of value, efficiency, cost savings, better customer service, etc. So these are the things we're doing. AI is pulling people into doing more stuff, and then you can once you get to that, now you can start using AI to make this better, to make the process better, to start predicting things, to do all sorts of different things. It's to answer your question, yes, it's accelerating. Gen AI, the cutting edge Gen AI is accelerating I would say the traditional AI adoption in that kind of journey, if that makes sense.
Driving towards rather than just following the technology for the technology's sake.
Exactly.
And so I guess if you're 3 or 4 years into the role now, if you look forward to the next sort of 2 to 3 years, what's success look like now that the Telana brand's up and running for you guys?
Our ambition is always about growth, because we're still not a large organization, and for us, growth will provide us with we think we need, right? So, and especially profitable growth. That's something that we already in the sense run pretty kind of efficiently. So, growth will become quite profitable. So we're not this kind of, 10 years ago, we would just not really kind of care about profitability. That was kind of a different world. We run pretty efficiently right now. Growth will deliver what we need. And if you think about growth, there's two elements. With growth, you will generate the right type of resources to reinvest or to leverage further investment further down the line to then, potentially do take a different kind of stage in our journey, but also internally, which is kind of super important for our people, is about growth provides career opportunities for everyone. Right? That's why I say to people, growth is a number, but actually means everything for everyone here, because if you want to grow in your careers, if you want to work with more interesting customers, progress into management, progress into in your career, in any role, whether that's finance, sales, or delivery, or any other operations, any other role. Growth is the one that fuels that. So, for us is getting that steady, profitable growth in the next 12, 18 months, prove that combining these two businesses and creating Telana is the right model, which I believe it is, and I'm pretty sure we will deliver on that. And if we deliver on that, then everything else is kind of our choice, because then it will be our choice whether we take further investment, whether we continue to reinvest in growth in different areas, whether we want to internationalize, but right now is delivering on especially you talk about next 12, 18 months, is delivering on, what we set out to deliver by joining the two businesses and creating Telana in the UK.
No, absolutely. Well, I'm really, really excited to see what the journey looks like over the next few years for you guys. As I say, I think the combination of the two businesses, the two partnerships that you guys are very well sort of positioned with on the Microsoft and Google side. I think it's ready made to be able to deliver that innovation for your customers. So, Andre, I like to finish these podcasts with a what I call Microsoft Mentors quickfire round. So a few quickfire questions, just a couple of short answers from yourselves. We'll do a couple of serious ones, a couple of fun ones, and see where we get to with it. If that sounds good.
I'm bracing myself for those. I'm always not very good at that, but I'll try my best.
Okay, so let's start off with the world that you live in. What's harder to bring together and define: technology strategy or team culture?
You say T culture?
Team culture, yeah.
Team culture.
Yeah. Put people in the mix and it always gets complicated, doesn't it?
Well, I guess if you have the right team culture, you be able to help customers with a tech strategy.
Been through lots of organizations at different phases. Do you prefer that sort of startup chaos or the complexity that comes with the bigger organizations?
Startup chaos, managed chaos, I would say. It has to be with a level, with a degree of management, because actually both Outreach and Ancoris, in that respect, work quite, you have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit on the both organizations, but actually we work both quite well run from the beginning. So chaos, so the freedom to be creative with a bit of management, but I much prefer that than kind of corporate management for the sake of it.
Absolutely. Having gone through your career, obviously you've moved into leadership roles. What do you think one cornerstone skill that anyone that wants to progress into senior leadership within tech, whether that's communication skills, organization, what sort of one key skill do you think has really unlocked your ability and to work in those sort of roles?
So the one thing I learned over the years is that what really helps helps the team is being available to them. People know or will perceive that you're very busy, and they'll perceive that you're always running around if you don't make time for them, even when you sometimes don't have the time or struggle to find the time. If you find the time for your team will feel comfortable to come to you when they need to, because if they perceive that you're always busy and always running around, they won't come to you. They either stew on issues, don't consult you on important decisions, or sometimes feel a bit lost and can't disengage. So, and that's all about them trusting them and all of those things that we talked about. But that being available to your team and showing that you're always available, they can always talk to you, is a really, really important thing in leadership.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, are there any, obviously we were talking just before we started, you've just been away and had a nice little break. Are there any sort of books or podcasts that you've recently listened to that you've got loads of really great ideas from?
Wolf, I'm not sure about, I'm still, the book I was reading on holiday is called Michel the Giant, which is this guy that grew up in a village in Togo. His dad had several wives, and he was one of the sons. And once he had a massive accident, he fell from a tree, and his dad, instead of taking him to hospital, he just did try to kind of they chopped the chicken's head off and rubbed blood all over his body to try and cure him and all that stuff. But then this guy decides to go and live in Greenland. So there's this journey of years. I haven't finished the book, so I have to get this. So far, I mean, the guy took him like 6 or 7 years. This is like in the 1950s, 1960s to get to Greenland. And they get to Greenland, they have never seen an African in person. So it's an incredible book. So I recommend. I haven't finished it, but I recommend it already.
The good thing about not finishing it yet is there's no spoilers from you. You don't know how it ends.
No spoilers. The guy does get to Greenland, which is, I mean, honestly, it's quite impressive. So I'm in the middle of that, and I guess there's a lot of learning about pursuing objectives and perseverance and all that stuff. That even just getting there is quite something. So I'm quite inspired.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Andre, it's been really great to learn a bit more about your career. As you said at the start, it's taken a bit of an unorthodox path. But I think that unorthodoxy has built up knowledge and experience across lots of different parts of the technology ecosystem that ultimately has led you to where you are now. So yeah, thanks very much for your time. I will also make sure that when the episode goes out, anyone that needs or wants to connect with Andre or wants to find out a bit more about Telana, I'll put their details with the podcast so you can go and find out a little bit more about who they are and what they do. But thanks very much for your time, mate. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Ollie. I did enjoy it, and always happy to connect to whoever wants to learn more about us. So looking forward to it. Thanks, Ollie.